Андрей Николаевич, коллеги, мы все в сборе, поэтому можно начинать. Наша панель вся в сборе. Попросить всех открыть камеры, и мы начинаем.
Александр Владимирович, я прям сразу вступаю, да?
Да, все, приветствую, мы все начинаем работать. Спасибо большое.
Good day, everybody. We warmly welcome all the speakers and participants at the BRICS Business Forum opening session number 1, COVID-19 and economic development within BRICS countries, issues and actions. We plan to discuss current situation and prospects for BRICS economies, pandemic containment policies and measures, new digital and innovative solutions in this area, and also agenda for joint actions to fight COVID-19. World economy is now in a painful situation. The latest IMF forecast showing minus 4.4% for this year. However, this is slightly better than in June because of the faster than expected recovery in the advanced and some emerging economies. And once again, however, current projections are very unstable because second wave of pandemic looks like a very strong downside risk for the development and for the forecast. Current projections imply wide negative output gaps and elevated unemployment rates across both advanced and emerging economies. A new very significant factor of the forecast expectations of persistent social distancing. Majority of BRICS economy also are falling this year in a range between 4 and 10%, with a pleasant exception for China, where GDP is expected to grow by nearly 2%. Now, colleagues, let me pass to our discussion with a very good representation of prominent national experts. I'm sorry in advance if I will pronounce not all your positions. That's only to save time. Thank you. We'll start traditionally with Brazilian chapter, and the virtual floor goes to Mr. Marcelo Souza Azevedo, Manager of Economic Analysis in the Brazilian National Confederation of Industry, with valuable insights on the developments in Brazilian economy and suggestions how to facilitate economic recovery. The floor is yours, Mr. Azevedo, please.
Thank you all. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening for you all. So I'd like to talk about first the impacts of the pandemics here in Brazil, and then some measures that were taken were taken to cope with those impacts. So I believe you have the presentation, or I can make it from here. I don't know how you all prefer it.
Well, at the moment, I think we don't have your presentation.
Okay, so I'll make the presentation from here. It's all right. Let's miss. Here we go. I believe it's okay now. We're seeing the presentation. So, without further ado, well, as already spoken, and every country has the same problem. The impacts were huge on GDP in the first and second quarters of this year in the Brazilian economy. And the main problems here started around March, and so the economy is already in the first quarter has already dropped about 2.5 points, and then we have in April almost shut down on almost all activities, lots of social distancing. So in April, we have a huge fall on the activity here in Brazil, and since May we have some recovery. So we have the second quarter in a huge drop of 9% plus, and seeing that the governments and Congress here in Brazil started lots of measures to cope with those issues. First of all, they're providing more funds for the healthcare system. In the first months of the pandemic, as you all know, and there's lots of concerns with the healthcare system in our countries. Brazil is no exception. And so there's lots of funds that were needed to cope with the huge amounts of cases that were growing back then and rapidly. So first of all, there was this need, and then there's this concern about the economic effects since the start of the pandemic. So first of all, we have there was a need to provide financial support to the most vulnerable groups of the population, the informal jobs, and people that it's already was under some financial support from the government. There was the financial support grew threefold for those people, and people that was in informal jobs that did not receive some financial support from the government started to receive that financial support. Is still are receiving that now, and although the financial support itself, the amount is thinner now than before, but still we will see in the future slides that the recovery is on way. So we're starting to phase out those kinds of measures. Cost of companies, one of the huge effects of the pandemic was in companies. The industry in Brazil was starting to recover from a previous crisis. So financial situations of the companies were not as solid, as sound as was needed to cope with this huge fall on revenues. So was needed to elevate some of the cost of companies and giving some credit, and that's was very needed for the companies to survive through this worst time and the pandemic, when factories were closed and of course demand was very low because of the restrictions on their businesses and also on the families themselves that to be quarantined. And labor legislation that in Brazil is more not as flexible as in other countries. There's lots of measures taken to make it more flexible during the pandemic to try to reduce the impact on employment too. And also credit restrictions. Credit in Brazil is already very expensive for companies, and since as already said, the costs of company was very high during the beginning of the pandemics and no revenues, so try to keep some credit for them. So we have huge drops in April for retail, manufacturing, services, but since May, recovery is very fast. And for retail, mainly because of the money that was given to the families, retail is already above the level it was in February, above 8%. Manufacturing is growing in a slower pace. It's still under the level it was in February, but services is as I think is happened is happening still in most of countries because of social distancing, and of course the service provided for families that require the social distancing to not happen to have those services still is growing, is recovering in a very slower pace, so it's still way under the level on February 2020. So the worst moment here in economic crisis was in Brazil, and the recovery began very quickly in May. This is the impacting in informal employment. The impact in formal employment was 2.3 million. You believe it's a very huge impact, but not as big as we anticipated, because of the huge impact they have in the economic itself. Probably is mainly because of the measures were taken to of hours reduction and contract suspension. These changes that were made in labor legislation. 9.5 workers had entered in those hours reduction or contract suspensions since the start of the pandemic, and you have a 2.3 loss in formal jobs that obviously could be much larger without those possibilities. Inflation is now a concern. It's not a concern. It's not reflecting still in consumer prices, but the huge amount of money that was given to the families, and also the disconnection between the chain of production chains, inputs and producers, and also inventories. Because of the quick slowdown and the quick recovery, there is there being a shortage of some inputs, and so prices are rising rapidly. There are no problems still in the consumer prices, but it is a concern for recovery. Here in CNI, we believed back in April of these three different lines of forecasts, and as you can see, the actual data was even worse than the worst forecast then, but the recovery was faster, and so we're trending towards the recovery baseline. And we believe that Brazilian GDP will fall around 4.2% in this year. And for recovery, we have two main concerns, and besides inflation. One of that is the gross debt to GDP ratio that will exceed 90% into 2020. Again, the use of the expansion of fiscal policy that was huge in this year is limited in Brazil, and it will be very limited next year. So that's why some of the measures for the pandemic are already being slowed down. And for those of you that have been accompanying manufacturing production in Brazil, as I already said before, and we started recovering from a huge loss in manufacturing that was in around to 2015, 2016. Since then, recovery being very, very small and slow for manufacturing here in Brazil. And so we have a fast recovery now in this year, but we're only getting to what it were in February, that it was still very far from 2014, 2010, before the previous crisis. So we try. So besides those measures that have already been taken, that and are in place still for the pandemic, Brazil is trying to go ahead with the competitiveness agenda that will help not only to recover from this crisis, but also to go ahead and go beyond that and recover the previous crisis to start actually growing, not only recovering from the previous crisis. And I think I'm finishing here. So it's a pleasure to be here, and I'll stay around to any questions and remarks that may be in place. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Azevedo. I have one or two small questions. Well, maybe the first, we see that your expectations for this year are more optimistic than the IMF, than that of the International Monetary Fund. Why so? And the second question is how your agri-food sector feels at the moment, because generally in the world, agri-food industry feels better than the other industries. Mr. Azevedo, we will welcome your answers.
Oh, thank you. Most of the sectors, I'll start by the second question.
Please turn your microphone.
Oh, it's okay now? You're listening? Okay. No?
Okay.
Oh, so most of the sectors actually had a huge impact during the start of the pandemic, and the food industries and also and pharmaceuticals and some others were not as affected, and even not affected at all, and some of them have still grew, and during the pandemic is still growing, pharmaceuticals and foods, for instance, and some others are still lagging somewhat behind, but these sectors are still in a good path. Also, agriculture has not stopped growing at all in the first and second quarters in terms of GDP and production. So actually a very different reality, since agriculture exports a lot from China, for instance, and China was a different timeline in terms of recovery and pandemics than us. So it helped also for industries to have demand for their products, while demand in Brazil was very restricted during that April and March months. And we are actually more optimistic than IMF and most of our partners here in Brazil, because we're seeing that recovery in industry will have some problems and because of those inputs, but as the problems and inputs in themselves show, that recovery in industry has been steady and very, very strong. So I believe that still in this year, recovery will be strong industry, and we are seeing that even in services, even with social distancing, some social distancing in Brazil, in many capitals are being very relieved of those services starting to keep up with recovery, and this industry has some room to grow, and it will be growing steadily in this last quarter. So that's why we believe in this strong recovery, not as strong as in the third quarter, but it's still strong in the fourth quarter, since the not so bad GDP fall for this year.
Thank you, Mr. Azevedo, for your more or less optimistic comments. Now I have a pleasure to give the floor to Mr. Leonardo Botelho Ferreira, Senior Advisor in the Brazilian Development Bank, with an expert view on the role that national development banks in BRICS countries could play in the overall anti-pandemic efforts. Please, Mr. Ferreira.
Thank you so much, Andrei, and I would like to thank the organization for inviting BNDES. It's a pleasure to be here. And on behalf of BNDES, I want to send my compliments to everyone in the panel. I will just share my screen here. I have a brief presentation. Okay. I'll just walk through some measures that BNDES had played, the important role that BNDES has played in this pandemic, and what we did in Brazil in order to fight the crisis, and the economic effect of the crisis, and some measures that were aimed at mainly three sectors. The first one was to preserve jobs, saving particularly focusing on SMEs. Of course, we had another focus that was the health sector, and of course, two more fronts, which were the large companies, what to do with some sectors, and the public sector, which was affected as well. Up to the moment, we have disbursed something around 100 billion reais, Brazilian reais, which stands for around 17 to 18 billion US dollars. And we have this huge social impact that we just could reach over than to 240,000 companies. And the measures could maintain over 8 million jobs. So I would briefly show you that we first focus on working capital. We have some flexible lines for the companies. So we assisted over 24,000 companies. We also supported heavily the public sector. BNDES just sent 20 billion Brazilian reais back to the Treasury in order to provide the Treasury some funds to social assistance programs. We also developed an emergency support program for the public sector, Brazilian public sector. It means states and municipalities here in Brazil, and some state-owned companies as well. And we have this huge employment protection program, which was developed with the Ministry of Economy, which provided the companies with some sort of credit lines to finance the payrolls for a certain period of time in these pandemics. We also developed a new initiative alongside with the civil society here and some private companies. It was a match funding platform. So for each Brazilian real donated by the company or an individual here in Brazil, BNDES contributes with another Brazilian real, and so we can send medical devices and equipment for over 260 hospitals here in Brazil. We also have some sort of standstill measure here in Brazil, suspension of payments due and their maturity dates. So we postponed these maturity dates. And both direct transactions, BNDES works also as a second-tier bank through commercial banks here in Brazil. Direct transactions account for, they are the largest transactions. So we reached more companies through our indirect transactions. We also made an emergency plan to the healthcare sector here, to some hospitals. We could reach almost 3,000 hospital beds in Brazil, new beds devoted to COVID here in Brazil. And of course, we had also some sectorial measures, such as for the aviation and the airliners here in Brazil. So we just provided Embraer, our Brazilian manufacturer, with a credit line of 300 million Brazilian reais to be supplemented with additional 300 million from a bank syndicate. And we are now discussing other measures in order to support airliners, companies here in Brazil. We also structured a very important transaction for the electric sector through the distribution companies, but reaching as well the generation and transmission companies, alongside with a pool of commercial banks. We have developed what we call Fundo de Crédito. It's based on the receivables of the small business here in Brazil. And it's a very interesting model because we are developing with some Brazilian fintechs and digital payment systems, so we can reach the very, very, very small business in remote parts of Brazil here. And we have this also very important, call it PEAC, which is new to BNDES in Brazil, which is a very huge guarantee scheme developed jointly with the Ministry of Economy, covering up to 100% of credit for small and medium companies in the commercial banks. So quite successful as well. So we have this myriad of measures, and we are still developing another products. There are some room. There is some room for a larger, I would say, intervention by BNDES. We have been watching closely with Minister of Economy, but I would like to share 2 more slides or 3 more slides on the opportunities that we have here in the recovery. And I think that that's an important room to cooperate with BRICS companies and BRICS financial institutions as well. Here at BNDES, we are open to discuss. BNDES is the service, I may say, service bank of the Brazilian federal government. And we ran the project preparation services for not only the federal government, but also for the state governments here in Brazil and municipalities. So we are developing concessions, PPPs, and privatization projects. Privatizations, I mean the sale of companies by states, municipalities, and even the federal government. We have now in our pipeline 74 mandated projects in all the sectors that you can see in the screen, from street lighting to sanitation to real estate, urban mobility, technology, communications, and so on and so forth. So we have this very diversified pipeline of projects, which will be launching into the economy an amount up to 170 billion Brazilian reais in capex. So very important investments to help Brazil in the recovery. And there is room for foreign investors. There is room for BRICS companies and financial institutions, we are open to discuss. I would just very briefly on the pipeline. We have very important projects in Brazil. We just have a very well-succeeded auction in the sanitation sector with the metropolitan region of the capital of Alagoas state. It was a very competitive bid. We have 7 competitors in the final round. And we have all these projects here in the pipeline to be to have auctions up to the 3rd or to 4th quarter of 2021. So things are happening here very fast, and we believe that the next year we're going to have a bunch of projects. The same for the highways. We are looking for concessionaires for these highways. It's a huge package of toll roads here in Brazil, over 10,000 kilometers, and we have as well some very important port projects here, including Port of Santos, which is the largest port in Brazil, where we are going to renew the concession for in the next year, we believe. So it's in the phase of studies. The studies are being concluded, and it's a very, very huge project. So I think that this is my final slide. I would say that very important projects, just like the sanitation company of Rio de Janeiro, which is one of the largest in Brazil, the Port of Santos, which is the largest, and the very interesting toll roads. So I would like to share this message with you, and of course here in BNDES we are looking forward to discuss business opportunities with investors. And just a final word on privatization. So we have this a huge pipeline of companies that are being sold by the states, including urban mobility, metropolitan trains, and important companies in the energy sector. So that's it. I would like to thank you and to reiterate that we are very confident in the recovery in Brazil. We have this huge pipeline of projects being developed prepared by BNDES alongside with the federal, the state, and the municipalities. And we are open to discuss with any of you who want to have more information on this. Thank you very much, Andrei.
Thank you very much, Mr. Ferreira. Well, thank you for your detailed presentation on the activities of the Brazilian Development Bank in combating negative effects of COVID-19. And trying to facilitate economic recovery. We hope that there are mechanisms and joint action by the national development BRICS banks and BRICS countries with the view to join resources and join efforts in anti-pandemic efforts. Thank you much. Now we turn to host country speakers. I have a pleasure to introduce to you Ms. Victoria Panova, Managing Director and Supervisor of the Russian National Committee on BRICS, Research Head of the BRICS Russia Expert Council. Victoria, we would ask you to brief us on the pandemic containment measures in Russia and respective actions and plans in the BRICS format. And also, we would like you to share your expert opinion on the priorities of such activities within BRICS. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Spartak. That's a real pleasure and honor for me to be at this meeting. I do have some in my presentation, I do have some Russian measures taken during their to uplift the economy for the COVID, but as I understand, Mr. Knobel will be rather talking about that, so I will devote much more time to BRICS as a whole and what's been done during the Russia's chairmanship and how COVID-19 impacted their priorities and activities taken by their by Russia. So next slide, please. When we talk about COVID, it did impact significantly our countries. As we know, India has surpassed by now 7.5 million confirmed cases. Russia is approaching 1.5 million cases. I think we have the best case scenario. Of course, Brazil is over 5 million. China managed better than anybody else, being hit first, but then taking unprecedented measures, very disciplined to overcome the pandemics. And now we see it as an example of how to deal with this tragedy and with this unfortunate event for all of us. But nevertheless, these numbers do indicate difficult situation in healthcare in most of the BRICS countries, and in turn, demand for strong and effective management needed to restore our economies. Next slide. We have BRICS that is representing over 40% of the world populations. This is extremely important. In 2020, the total GDP of the 5 countries amounted to 25% of the global GDP, and the share in international trade stood at almost 20%, which is 6.7 trillion. Mutual exports of our countries have also grown by 45% over the past 5 years. Why I'm taking their period of 5 years is because in addition to it being previous Russian chairmanship, we also are counting progress reached by the strategy for BRICS economic partnership that we are looking into, evaluating this year, and looking into the new economic partnership strategy taken, and thus it is extremely important. Next slide, please. So since the creation of BRICS, we saw the participating countries having significant progress in economic, technological, social, humanitarian development, and they strengthened their positions in the international arena. In fact, here, since it's a business council, we're talking more about economic measures, trade measures, investments, but what is important and what is of utmost significance for BRICS is that it's not just the economy with which we started earlier, it is all the 3 pillars, namely global governance and politics, economics, investment and trade, and third, humanitarian cooperation and people-to-people contacts. All the 3 pillars have grown significantly, and each of those, they enhance each other, and thus this contributes to the general increase. And we saw over the past 5 years, the GDP of the BRICS countries growing faster than their global GDP. Next slide. When we talk about COVID-19 implications for the BRICS economies, we saw high rising human costs worldwide. And as in April 2020, as a result of the pandemic, the global economy was projected to contract sharply by 3% in 2020, which was worse than the crisis in 2008-2009. Now the projects are slightly better. I would not be going into all the countries and considering them all, but what is important that from the actions taken together by the BRICS countries, including by the NDP, which I will be talking a bit later, I believe that BRICS countries as a total came out better than the world in general from current situation. And now we're having projections still quite severe, and Dr. SPARTAK have talked about it at the very beginning, saying that only China is growing insignificantly this year, but the rest of the economy is contracting, looking into certain recovery only next year. But nevertheless, if you compare it to general global situation, it is much better. Next slide, please. So there were several measures taken to support Russian economy. Next slide, please. And overall, as a result of unprecedented governmental measures to support the economy and citizens, Russia has passed its period for economy better than many other countries did. We talk about social protection measures, for example, increased monthly unemployment allowances to dismissed and registered as unemployed after 1st of March 2020 people, up to the minimum wage, and additional monthly payments to families with children and unemployed parents, possible delays in loan payment for those who lost 30% or more of their income, and other. They were offered some support to the regional budgets. We saw support for business, provision of direct non-reimbursable financial assistance to SMEs in the worst affected sectors, and others. I would not be naming them all. There's some problem with the organizers to change slides for some reason. Could I ask you to move to slide 10 so that we do not further. Measures to foster digitalization. Yeah, further. In Russia, where digital payments are already common, COVID-19, and this is important because this is part of their, it is a very important contribution to the fourth industrial revolution and the breakthroughs that technological and economic breakthroughs that we have to be up to. And COVID-19 gave us all challenges, but we also saw significant opportunities with it fostering and being a significant driver for even greater use of digital services. Thus, we saw a central bank lowering waiving fees for instant payments. We saw lowering the fees paid by online merchants for the acceptance of cards to encourage the use of online purchases for essential goods and services. Allowing banks an automatic extension of all banks' cards approaching the expiration date, and other measures that were important. Next slide, please. We in Russia, the government adopted an economic recovery fund to respond to the challenges of the economic crisis that implied allocation of 6.5 trillion rubles. There are two stages, of which I think Mr. Pavel will be talking in much more detail, so I would not be stopping here for long as well. Next slide. Once more. When we talk about BRICS, how they managed to deal with the COVID-19, we have to take into account the global role of BRICS and its future contribution to the crisis management, and this is the most essential part. We commanded their launch of new development bank, and as you remember, it's really unprecedented speed where such difficult projects came from initial idea to actual implementation. That was already something that even very well-connected Western countries and economies could not achieve, for example, during their G7 activities. And we saw it, we already see it in their history of over 40 years of interaction within the G7. They never did such a, especially during the first decade, they never managed to achieve something like that. But COVID-19 also demonstrated that NDB is able not only to respond to earlier initial ideas, but also to what's happening in the world and how BRICS countries have to respond to current challenges. And that is why there was a decision for the BRICS NDP to allocate to Brazil, India, China, and South Africa a special fund up to $10 billion to manage the economies for the period of coming out of the crisis and resuming economic operations. And this could be considered one of the best practices globally to tackle the COVID-19 pandemic in the world. Besides, we also remember that following the decisions of the U15 and Johannesburg in 2018, BRICS nations reiterated their interest in creating a mechanism for developing and using a vaccine against pandemic diseases. And the work in this area, unfortunately, although it's been ongoing, but quite slowly over the past years, so the pandemic have gave an additional impetus. And I'm hoping that during Russia's presidency, Russia's chairmanship will be able to build on their early initiatives with current instruments to fight the current coronavirus infectious outbreak, but also to be prepared for future possible pandemics. As you know, Russia recently became the first country to in the world to register vaccine against coronavirus. We now have even 2. And we're ready to share our best practices with the BRICS countries. We also have China at the final stage of testing their vaccines, numerous ones. And we would be, I think it is a very important notion that all the BRICS countries demonstrate their desire to cooperate and join forces in this manner. I also mentioned earlier their strategy for BRICS economic partnership for 2015-20. We've been doing an evaluation and Professor SPARTAK was the leading person in doing the overview of evaluation of this strategy. We will be presenting it later at their academic forum, which is to take place in just 2 days. And it will be also later on presented to all the BRICS Sherpas. What is important about this evaluation, that it allowed for us to look into overall BRICS progress over the 5 years, but also see how their challenges that arise unexpectedly, like current pandemic, like the current turbulences, how our long-term strategies allow to deal with that and allow to be flexible enough to have fast track measures to overcome those for BRICS countries and for the rest of the world, in fact. And this evaluation managed to see the weak points, the strong points. We have to go further, and it allowed to see how the next economic partnership strategy would be more efficient and more focused on 3 priority areas, which would be vital not only in our country's recovery for the pandemics, but also for general leadership in the global world. Another one within Russia's chairmanship was that BRICS adopted guidelines for promoting effective participation of micro, small, and medium enterprises in international trade that applies exchange of views and share best practices on measures and approaches to integrate MSMEs in the mainstream economy and international trade. Since, and I mentioned that we're living in the time of the 4th industrial revolution, we had a very welcome initiative early, and trade ministers this year agreed to foster collaboration within Partner to encourage capacity building in cutting-edge technologies and establish BRICS industrial and science parks, innovation centers, technology business incubators, and enterprises networks. Trade ministers of BRICS also published Understanding on Investment Facilitation, aimed at strengthening cooperation within promoting cooperation, enhancing transparency, and improving efficiency in investment operations. Previous Brazilian colleagues talked about agriculture a lot, and in fact differently, but it is important for each of our countries, and we are responsible for BRICS and global food security. And BRICS Ministers of Agriculture called for rolling back the trade and production distorting agricultural measures that were put in place in response to COVID-19 and its effects in a timely and effective manner. We, as BRICS, also earlier launched their BRICS Agricultural Platform for exchange. And in fact, I think it is a good idea for our countries to enhance cooperation in this area in order to allow for self-sufficient development of our countries. To name but a few, ministers of labor also agreed to mitigate the impact of the pandemic by supporting the creation of more decent jobs, including those provided by MSME, removing barriers faced by vulnerable groups who would like to enter the labor market, and ensuring basic social protection for all as essential, combating all forms of poverty. And also they requested BRICS Network of Labor Research Institute to conduct research on support of employment and income in the context of the COVID-19 crisis. And we're looking forward to having recommendations, in-depth analysis of how current situation could be looked in order to also see into the future, not only how they are to overcome the current pandemics, but how to allow for employment places in BRICS countries to ensure sustainable development. Next slide, please. This is all that's done within their official tracks, but it's also important that we are having a number of track 2 initiatives. Despite the pandemics, Russia's chairmanship is having, and those are only included in the calendar, but each event is in fact multiplied by numerous Zoom conferences that we're having. We are having over 150 events, 90 held so far, both track 1 and track 2. When we're talking about BRICS Business Council and BRICS Think Tank Council, they were established at the same year, 2013, as a result of South African chairmanship in 2013. And we, since then, are having intensive cooperation, not only between those two entities, but BTTC is responsible for having two very important tracks, civil track and academic track. Civil forum was held earlier in September, and there were a number of initiatives that were offered to Sherpa. In fact, we managed to not only to ask and invite our Russian Sherpa and who promised to give it further to other BRICS Sherpas, but we also managed to mobilize our G20 Sherpa, who took great interest in a number of initiatives that civil society invited, and those would also be transferred later to all the G20 members as well. So BRICS is having an impact here. And there are a number of health-related and economy-related measures that were suggested by the civil society to help our economies overcome the crisis, and especially our populations to come out of the crisis in the best possible manner. I would be happy to share them with you. It can be found also on the site, and I think NCR BRICS could write it in chat, the link to those recommendations. As I mentioned earlier, since actually 2008, we are having BRICS Academic Forum. It will be held just in 2 days for 3 days, and we're expecting over 200 participants there. We would be happy if you could also join in and take part in those. We are elaborating more recommendations, including in the area of economy, finance, fighting the pandemics, establishing anti-crisis measures, and we would be highly welcoming your ideas on that as well. I cannot share them for now because they're still in the process of agreement. But as I said, I would like to ask you for contribution and for your expert analysis on those. Next slide, please. Not to take much time, I think I already overcame my the time I had. I would say that impact of COVID-19 is still to see. We're all at least most of us are going through the second wave. We managed to go through the first wave with a certain degree of resilience, a lot of it thanks to BRICS cooperation. But we need more, and we need further actions and ideas in order to go together hand in hand, overcoming this pandemics. We've built a solid foundation for further cooperation to fight epidemiological threats, and I think BRICS is much more effectively looking now and better looking globally, and is more like an example to developing world, because we're not playing this blaming game, and we are just looking into what can be done in order to promote our populations and each other's economies. And it is true that closer cooperation between the BRICS would offer an opportunity to mitigate the negative effects of the crisis and contribute to the recovery of the global economy. Thank you so much, and I will be happy to answer all your questions.
Thank you very much, Victoria, for your full-scale presentation covering both Russian national anti-pandemic policies and efforts to combat COVID-19 on the BRICS level. It is very interesting because, especially for me, the second part of presentation, we all believe that BRICS is a serious economic formation with good potential, especially in the future. But we see that at this very difficult moment for all the members of BRICS, BRICS format could really serve as an additional resource for economic recovery. And I think we will hear similar opinions on this subject later on today. Thank you very much. We will turn to questions at the end of our speeches, because we are slightly running out of time. I should remind speakers that we have to hold to about 10 minutes schedule for presentation. But nevertheless, Victoria, thank you very much for your presentation. It is really very beneficial for our BRICS Business Forum. We have with us today one of the prominent Russian experts on the economic analysis and forecasting, Mr. Alexander Knobel, head of the Institute of International Economy and Finance and the Russian Academy of Foreign Trade. Alexander, as I know you have the latest calculations and estimates for the Russian economy, please share your views on the future developments. The floor is yours.
Да, уважаемые коллеги, рад вас всех приветствовать. Очень приятно в такой компании выступать и делиться своими соображениями. Господин Спартак, спасибо большое, что так меня представили. Действительно, я хотел бы рассказать кратко про сценарий социально-экономического развития и бюджетной политики России, но не только на этот год, но и заглянуть немножко на среднесрочную перспективу на 3-4 года вперед. Вот госпожа Панова в предыдущем выступлении очень подробно и качественно описала, что разные страны БРИКС реагируют тем или иным образом на пандемию и вводят определенные ограничения, определенные меры политики. Предыдущие спикеры также подробно рассказывали. Я бы хотел рассказать именно о том, что мы можем ожидать в российской экономике в результате того или иного развития событий, касающегося мировых пандемических процессов. Пожалуйста, следующий слайд. Ну, понятно, что мы все страны БРИКС находятся во внешне примерно одинаковых условиях, в условиях глобальных шоков в мировой экономике. И текущая ситуация известным образом сильно отличается от всех предыдущих экономических кризисов, с которыми страны БРИКС сталкивались за последние 30-40 лет. Ну, во-первых, конечно, мы наблюдаем спад совокупного предложения в связи с теми или иными карантинными ограничительными мерами. Это приостановка работы предприятий и нарушение цепочек поставок промежуточных и конечных товаров. Естественно, это снижение мобильности трудовых ресурсов из-за перекрытия границ. Но одновременно с этим у нас наблюдается еще и спад совокупного спроса. Собственно, это и сокращение спроса на товары и услуги, товары длительного пользования, и сокращение международной торговли. То есть в этом смысле текущий кризис является одновременно и кризисом спроса, и кризисом предложения. И Россия здесь по отношению к остальному миру испытывает примерно те же самые шоки, примерно то же самое воздействие, что и другие страны БРИКС, поэтому в этом смысле мы все находимся в одинаковых условиях. Кроме того, мы, понятно, находимся в условиях неопределенности относительно распространения коронавируса. Точно никто не может предсказать, когда это закончится, когда, наконец-то, мы все получим вакцину, которая в глобальном масштабе будет способна предотвращать распространение этого заболевания. Также мы в этом году наблюдали и продолжаем наблюдать падение мировых цен на базовые сырьевые товары, но и в дальнейшем на другие товары инвестиционного значения. Ну и, как это обычно бывает в условиях кризиса, капитал бежит из рискованных активов, что способствует укреплению доллара США относительно валют развивающихся стран. Пожалуйста, следующий слайд. И вот в рамках этих условий мы рассматриваем на самом деле два сценария, которые целиком и полностью будут определяться развитием эпидемиологической и медицинской ситуации относительно того вируса, с которым мы сейчас имеем дело. Собственно, в первом варианте мы ожидаем постепенное восстановление мировой экономики и начало массовой вакцинации к концу 2020-го, началу 2021 года. В другом консервативном, таком более пессимистичном сценарии мы ожидаем, что так или иначе восстановление экономики будет более медленным, и частично ограничения будут вводиться и поддерживаться между осенью 2020 года и весной 2021 года. Но, собственно, сейчас мы в том или ином виде наблюдаем, как в разных странах эти ограничения потихоньку вводятся, пусть и не с тем темпом, с которым они вводились весной. Сейчас только Ирландия вернула те ограничения по перемещению, по деятельности предприятий, которые она вводила весной 2020 года. Кроме того, мы, естественно, принимаем внимание сделку ОПЕК+, согласно которой ожидается снижение мировой добычи нефти, и впервые для России это играет такое существенное значение, потому что Россия также взяла на себя обязательства по снижению добычи в существенных объемах, и фактически впервые за последние 15 лет объемы добычи российской нефти существенно снизится. Естественно, в этих условиях, в зависимости от вариантов, у нас есть свои ожидания, как будет вести мировая цена на нефть. Конкретно для России наибольшее значение имеет цена на нефть марки Urals, хотя, естественно, она очень сильно скоррелирована с мировыми ценами на другие сорта нефти, которые торгуются на мировых биржах. В России мы ожидаем инфляцию на достаточно низком уровне, она будет находиться все равно вокруг целевого значения, установленного Центральным банком, это 4% в год. В базовом сценарии мы предполагаем, что она немного ниже, ну а в консервативном сценарии на уровне 4%. В базовом сценарии мы предполагаем, что она будет ниже из-за наличия дезинфляционных факторов. Ну и кроме того, в России мы будем ожидать некоторое снижение численности населения. Это объективный демографический тренд. И несмотря на меры поддержки рождаемости, темпы снижения населения в России будут несколько сокращаться. но все равно отрицательная убыль населения будет наблюдаться в ближайшие несколько лет. Пожалуйста, следующий слайд. Таким образом, мы видим, что при разных сценарных условиях мы можем ожидать разное значение основных показателей. Ну и, конечно, мы должны ориентироваться на глобальный темп экономического роста, потому что от этого будет зависеть спрос на российский экспорт, от этого будет зависеть предложение российского импорта, от этого будет зависеть склонность к утечке капитала. И здесь мы также для двух сценариев, которые определяются распространением вируса в современных условиях, мы прогнозируем разные значения мирового темпа роста в эти годы. Понятно, что эти темпы роста, они, в общем-то, не нами придуманы. Это прогноз Всемирного банка, прогнозы Международного валютного фонда. Вот некоторые средние значения мы используем. Ну и, как я уже сказал, уже вот в 2020 году ожидается существенное снижение добычи нефти. Фактически полностью это перетечет в российских условиях снижении экспорта нефти, потому что внутрироссийская потребность в нефти как сырье для нефтеперерабатывающей промышленности, скорее всего, будет удовлетворена на 100%, поэтому это напрямую окажет влияние на экспортные доходы и на платежный баланс, а следовательно, на обменный курс. Пожалуйста, следующий слайд. Следующий слайд включите, пожалуйста. И, да, соответственно, исходя из этого, мы прогнозируем некоторые внутренние условия для наших сценарных прогнозов. Мы будем наблюдать ослабление курса рубля в 2020 году, собственно, это сейчас уже есть, и по итогам года ослабление будет иметь место. При этом номинальный курс будет находиться на достаточно комфортном уровне. Ну и инфляция, как я уже сказал, в зависимости от сценария, будет либо немного меньше, либо немного выше целевого значения регулятора в 4% пункта повышения цен в год. Пожалуйста, следующий слайд. Ну, вот здесь вот представлена существенная часть этого прогноза. Это прогноз счета текущих операций, потому что именно через счет текущих операций и будут трансплантироваться шоки мировой экономики в российские условия. И хотелось бы отметить, что несмотря на существенное снижение экспорта, прежде всего за счет снижения мировой цены на нефть и одновременном снижении физических объемов поставок российской нефти за рубеж, тем не менее счет текущих операций будет достаточно устойчивым и сохранится в области положительных значений. Почему? Потому что у российской внешнеэкономической деятельности есть очень важная стабилизирующая особенность. Она заключается в том, что, как правило, и сейчас текущая ситуация не является исключением, падение экспортных доходов сопровождается всегда ослаблением курса национальной валюты, уменьшением импорта товаров и сокращением отрицательного сальдо торгового баланса услугами. И в этой связи, несмотря на падение экспортных доходов, за счет снижения баланса торговли услугами, за счет снижения импорта, за счет снижения отрицательного сальдо инвестиционного баланса, счет текущих операций будет положительным, и, конечно, в 2020 году он будет существенно ниже, чем в 2019, но потом будет восстанавливаться, и в любом случае к 2023 году уже достигнет значений, которые имели место в 2018-2019 годах. Пожалуйста, следующий слайд. И, собственно, исходя из этого, мы будем наблюдать относительно умеренные темпы падения российской экономики. По крайней мере, в 2020 году они будут точно ниже, чем темпы падения развитых экономик, таких как Евросоюз или Соединенные Штаты Америки, Великобритания, будут сопоставимы с темпами падения мировой экономики, ну и, конечно, тоже сопоставимы с темпами падения экономики стран БРИКС. И уже в 2021, 2022, 2023 годах мы будем наблюдать положительные темпы роста, которые при положительном, благоприятном для нас течении обстоятельств уже будут превышать темпы роста 2019 года. И, в общем-то, экономика восстановится к концу 2022 года уже до уровня 2019 года, а с 2023 года мы выйдем на более высокое значение валового продукта. Другое дело, что темпы роста все равно не будут позволять нам обеспечивать рост благосостояния, который нам бы хотелось иметь место, и темпы роста все равно будет ниже, чем, например, это будет иметь место в Китае. Одновременно с этими умеренными темпами роста будет наблюдаться достаточно устойчивые показатели, которые будут свидетельствовать о макроэкономической стабильности, потому что уровень безработицы и так в России достаточно низкий, хотя вот в 2020 году он вырос до 6% в связи с известными событиями, но так или иначе к 2022-2023 году опять снизится до 4,5-5% традиционно для российской экономики. И при этом, конечно, будет иметь место дефицит бюджета, однако мы знаем, что у России достаточно высокие золотовалютные резервы, низкий уровень государственного долга, и что в 2020 году дефицит бюджета существенно ниже, чем в большинстве стран мира, что в 2021, 2022, 2023 годах дефицит федерального бюджета будет находиться на уровне 2-2,5% пункта ВВП, что, в общем-то, без проблем будет покрываться либо государственными заимствованиями, которые в 2020 году обеспечили существенную долю финансирования государственного бюджета без использования Фонда национального благосостояния, так и это будет один из источников финансирования дефицита бюджета в последующие годы. Пожалуйста, следующий слайд. Собственно, на этом мне хотелось бы завершить и просто отметить, что в 2020 году у нас действительно падение импорта, которое всегда наблюдается из-за ослабления курса национальной валюты, несколько уменьшило темпы падения ВВП и сделало их не такими большими. Конечно же, больше всего отрицательного вклада в падение вносит изменение конечного потребления, падение спроса. И в 2020 году также проблемы были из-за снижения инвестиций. В последующих периодах, как я уже сказал, ситуация будет восстанавливаться. И, в общем-то, за счет роста потребления, инвестиций и экспорта мы будем обеспечивать умеренные темпы роста, более высокие, чем даже в 2019 году, но при этом все равно недостаточные, чтобы обеспечить эффективное сокращение отставания до развитых стран. Большое спасибо. На этом у меня все. На вопросы тоже буду готов ответить, если таковые появятся.
Okay, thank you, Alexander, for your thoughtful presentation on the economic activity in Russia. What I should say, the major points of your presentation are that economic situation is estimated to be stable in this year and the coming years. And the second is that economic recovery will be modest. And therefore, Russia needs for more expansive development of cooperation with BRICS countries. Dear colleagues, it's my pleasure to invite to our discussion Indian colleagues, Mr. Niranjan Hiranandi, President Asocham, Managing Director of Hiranandani Group of Companies, National President of the National Real Estate Development Council. please share with us your view and expectations towards economic development under pandemic pressures. Please, the floor is yours.
A very good afternoon to each and every one of you. I am actually delighted to be on this BRICS forum. And I think interaction between our countries is going to be extremely important for each and every one of us to actually get out of this crisis. This was just mentioned about what we really need to do in taking care of the pandemic situation. And I think you mentioned, one of the persons mentioned about how the health aspect is taken care of and how we need to take care to see that the vaccines are provided to each and every one of us once this discovery is done. I think BRICS becomes a very important platform, which I think we should utilize to the best and to see that we can take our countries forward for the benefit of each and every one of our citizens. The first thing which I want to mention is about the handling of the crisis that took place in India. Our Prime Minister did a very strong lockdown of the entire country. This benefited us in several ways. The first, it gave us time to understand how to face this pandemic. This was absolutely strange and unknown to most of the people, and really the realization of how it should be tackled gave us some time in order to meet the thought process. The second important factor was to see that the healthcare systems could actually catch up with it. With a large population of India and sparse healthcare facilities which were there, we needed some time in order to ramp up these facilities. Today, because we were able to contain the pandemic at the early stages, we have had probably the lowest mortality rate in the entire world for those affected by COVID. This is kind of a learning story as to how such epidemics need to be handled, and we would look forward to consultations of various countries to understand how the results of what each country has done. And I think an understanding of that will be an important for us as lessons in the future. The third important factor was to be able to see how medicines, ventilators, masks, and other facilities were ramped up. Again, for a large country like India, it was very difficult at the initial stages. However, very soon this was ramped up and things were taken care of. I'm mentioning this because crisis situations requires collaboration between countries, and again, I feel that BRICS platforms should be able to help us in order to meet this measure. We come back to the real important factor of the economic and employment story and the position of economics in our country as compared to all the rest of the countries. We did find much more bigger fall in the GDP of our country than we have seen in other neighboring countries, especially the positive effect in China, which has seen a positive growth of GDP. We have had to see a negative growth. Our calculations show somewhere between a negative growth of 5 to 6%. The World Bank, of course, has estimated a 10.2% of fall in the GDP is expected up to March of next year. This is really a startling problem for us, especially among the marginalized sectors of our economy. The savings sector in this has been the food production in the country, which we have been able to reach every corner of our country, and the distribution systems, both in terms of digital in the banking system, as well as the distribution systems in terms of food distribution to the poorest of the poor, has been extremely successful operation that have taken place. The economic package, which has been done by our Prime Minister, is of $265 billion at the first instance. In comparison to the other countries in the world, it is a smaller package and more on the supply-ended thing. the second round of stimulus packages are now being doled out in order to create a demand side. The first packages were more on the supply side end, which took place. It is quite different than the type of stimulus packages which were given in the Western countries and other countries of the world, and the policies in terms of financial prudence shown by the finance ministry. Only time will tell as to how this has worked well within our country. Many of the sectors have been seeing an economic revival, which has been quite positive in the terms of activities like steel, cement, construction, car manufacturing, and others who have seen a plus, which has been quite substantial. However, other segments which are definitely affected negatively, like aviation, hospitality, travel, tourism, and a part of the construction real estate sector has been negatively affected and still partially continues to do so. So what we are really looking forward to is a stronger demand side infusion from our government in order to see that the economy picks up again faster, in order to see that the negative predicted by the World Bank does not actually actualize. And we are looking forward to two other segments which we believe will make this positive change. One is an additional investments into infrastructure. Today, we have the fastest growing highway network in the world. The amount of kilometers per day is the highest in the entire world. We are looking forward to more investments by the government and the other sectors. Another interesting facet, which was also mentioned by the Brazilian friends of ours, was that a large amount of government sector is now being sought to be privatized. This, in return of funds and investments going back into the economy, will be very useful, and looking forward to a large amount of investments worldwide to come into the Indian economy through the BRICS, which I believe is a much smaller partnership and needs to be strengthened and further expand. We are now looking forward to a huge amount of cross-trade to be improved between the BRICS countries. And in this conference, we will certainly look at this aspect of it extremely positively. We do believe that multilateral trade, but trade between our partnership in the BRICS platform will lead to a huge amount of difference. We have, at this point of time, a huge amount of requirement of energy. Some of the countries like Russia have had seen surpluses in energy availability. I think partnerships of various types between our countries will see the difference. I am looking forward to this relationship to be strengthened on this platform or any other platform that is important to our country. And we look forward to relationships in science, technology, medicine, and other factors also. We have to lift our societies in order to make a better quality of life of all our citizens of the entire world. And we look forward to these platforms to make this paradigm happen. Thank you very much. Look forward to meet you again and again.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It is rather optimistic, as it should be, for BRICS countries. One short question. What is your personal opinion? How has India managed by the moment the COVID story? Only your opinion, a short one. And what are the prospects?
I think the first aspect of it has been handled extremely well, which is the health aspect of it. And I think we must compliment the Prime Minister, the entire government for handling it extremely well. The second part of it on the economic side, I think we are looking forward to more inputs, more stimulus packages, and other things still to come. So we do look forward to our governments and other aspects of the economy to really come back. So on the first, great compliments to the government. On the second, a large amount of expectations which are still to be realized.
Thanks. we see that in India, business-government relations enhanced during the pandemic crisis. That's very good. Second speaker from India is Dr. Ajit Ranat, Group Executive President and Chief Economist in Aditya Birla Group. You have a full-fledged multinational company with highly diversified international business. So what are your professional feelings on the current economic situation and business situation? And could you comment on specific economic, monetary, and fiscal policies pursued by the government in combating the COVID-19 effects, please?
Thank you, Mr. Andrey. I hope I'm audible to you. And I wish everybody a good evening, good afternoon, and good morning from wherever they are participating. And I also want to mention that I'm fortunate that I work in a group where we are operating in all the BRICS countries, either in manufacturing operations, including in Russia, in China, or also in Brazil, but also in trading or marketing operations. So very happy to be part of a multinational, but we are Indian head office in India, and we are an Indian multinational. I would also like to compliment my colleague, Mr. Niranjan Hiranandani, who has very well explained the situation. And I must reiterate what he said, that because we had one of the harshest lockdown starting in the last week of March, it was a practical shutdown of the economy. 75% of the economy was shut down. So supply and demand shut down, you can say. That's why the quarterly GDP went down by 24%. And that's one of the reasons why the GDP forecast for this year is shrink by -10. But Mr. Andrey, as you have instructed me, let me just briefly describe the monetary, fiscal, and economic policies in place in response. So number one, monetary policy. As you know, interest rates have been substantially cut like other central banks, and a huge amount of liquidity support has been given to the banking system, especially with a focus on micro and small and medium enterprises, MSME we call them. In particular, there is a loan guarantee scheme from the central government to the tune of 3 trillion rupees, especially for MSMEs. This is a collateral-free loan which will be guaranteed by the central government in case of a default, and no payment is due for almost 3 years, I think. So this is one big example of a liquidity support, especially for small businesses. And I might tell you that 3 trillion rupees is roughly equal to 1.5% of India's GDP. Secondly, the Reserve Bank of India has given a 6-month moratorium on all term loans, which means that no interest payment is due for 6 months. That is going to end now, and after October there will be resuming of interest. So this is just a moratorium. Third, there's been a loan restructuring package. A special committee was set up, and those loans, or those businesses which just need cash flow problems or which need to have some more time, even after moratorium, they will be given a restructuring package, so that loan will not be considered to be defaulted. That is going to be operational, and the restructured new timetable will allow them to repay the loans up to 2021 or 2022. Then, of course, there's been a huge amount of liquidity support for mutual funds, asset companies. There's a special package for small businesses, as I said. The central bank has also been doing a lot of bond purchases to ensure that there's a huge amount of liquidity. And of course, interest rates have been kept low. So that is on the monetary policy side. Number two, fiscal policies. So that is the fiscal policies so far have been aimed mainly at the agriculture sector or rural India. For example, there's been a sharp increase in food grain production, procurement. Food grain production has been very good. both in the winter harvest and in the expected harvest coming up later this year. So the government procurement has been a record, and this has helped farmer income. There's also been a direct cash injection into farming households. And there is also a special package of cash injection for women-headed households in rural areas. There's been a doubling of the budget for Rural Jobs Program, which is India's largest employment guarantee scheme for rural areas. And there's been an expansion of the subsidized food grain distribution. So all this has been under fiscal policy. And as Mr. Hiranandani, my colleague, said, what is now expected in the fiscal package 2.0, we call it, is whether this will be extended to urban areas and whether fiscal demand will be extended to substantially increased infrastructure spending. So that is what is expected in the near future. Number 3, so I've described monetary policies, I've described fiscal stimulus so far, and more is expected. And number 3, overall economic policies. So what are those? These are policies which will have an impact not only in the near term, but actually more in the medium to longer term. So for example, we have had major reforms announced in the areas of education, in the areas of agriculture, in the areas of labor. In agriculture in particular, there's been a much more economic freedom given to farmers and to contract farming, and to freedom to sell anywhere in the country and not be constrained by local marketing yards and market committees. There's also been a big boost for infrastructure spending up to 100 trillion rupees, which is 50% of India's GDP over the next 5 years. And major production-linked incentives have been announced for several sectors, including electronics, so that companies can invest in India, and even foreign companies can invest in India. So far, India has received something like $50 billion in FDI, foreign direct investment. And FDI policy has been relaxed across several sectors, including in defense and in space. So these will have medium to longer term impact. So having said all this, it is true that while on the health front, we have had good outcomes. The fatality rate is among the lowest in the world. That is, we have had something like 7.5 to 8 million cases which have been infected. The recovery rate is almost 88%. The fatality rate is low, but still we await the formal vaccine announcement. I think Indian companies are also in the racing against time. But apart from vaccine, the treatment and prevention on both these things and preparation on the health front is going well. We of course now have to focus on the fiscal stimulus and on economic revival. Just last 1 or 2 sentences I want to say that I think the BRICS, this is a wonderful forum, the BRICS Business Forum, to also showcase opportunities for investors as well as investment opportunities like what I mentioned in India, especially the infrastructure program, which is ambitious, which is 100 trillion rupees in the next 5 years, which is almost 50% of GDP. And these will be projects which would have 20 to 30 years gestation, investment opportunities with a very steady rate of return, and perhaps can be arranged in such a way that we can also take care of the exchange rate risks, especially if it's done in the BRICS framework. So I think this will go a long way towards meeting the investment needs of infrastructure as well as from investor side. And the BRICS mechanism is an ideal mechanism to do this multilateral connection. So I'll stop here and would welcome questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you much, Mr. Ranat, for your comments on the BRICS role in potential economic recovery. Really, we're speaking mostly on the subject of the national economic recovery, but we keep in mind BRICS Forum. It's really has a big unrealized potential, and we, during our chairmanship, try to reveal the existing opportunities to combat COVID-19 and joint development. Now we start presentations from our Chinese colleagues who focus on digital and innovative solutions to combat COVID-19. It is my pleasure to introduce Mr. Wang Xiaodong, Deputy General Manager, Deputy Party Secretary from the EPEC e-commerce company, with presentation on innovative digital approaches of EPEC e-commerce platform to promote economic recovery of the BRICS nations. Together with EPEC, we will learn how to live and conduct business in the world fragmented. Please, Mr. Wang.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. SPARTAK. Good morning to Brazil, friends, and good evening, good afternoon to Russia colleagues, and good morning to, good evening to Indian and South Africa colleagues. I'm from EPEC. On behalf of EPEC, I'm honored to join the BRICS Business Forum, and I want to give my sincere appreciation of the organizer of the events and host of our session. Thank you. And I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce close connections between EPEC and BRICS countries. Also, before I start, I'd like to briefly introduce our Chinese GDP growth from the beginning of the 2020 this year. And from the opening dates, on our country is in the past 9 months, we of the forecast this year will of the 2% of the almost GDP growth. And in the last year, 2019, is a growth, GDP growth is 6.1%. Fortunately, this year will recover only that 1/3 of the last year, because the first quarter of this year, the GDP is minus because COVID-19 starts, and in the second quarter of the year, the GDP of the country of China is 2.1% of growth, and in the third quarter, the data is 4.9% growth. It means we start to recovery. Recovery, it means. So that is a brief data of our China's overall the economy growth, GDP growth, especially status. And on behalf of the EPEC, I'd like to share with you the same initiatives for the development of the B2B e-commerce under the heat of the COVID-19 pandemic. First of all, let me briefly introduce EPEC.com. EPEC is a supply chain to business e-commerce platform, and we can offer the online transactions for industrial products based on the experience and achievements of supply chain and a procurement management of practice of SPARTAK Group. SPARTAK Group is a China Petrochemical Corporation. It's a state-owned petroleum petrochemical enterprise group of China. EPEC e-commerce company is a operator company of the EPEC platform, which is a wholly owned subsidiary of SPARTAK International Company. Since it is a commercial operation in April 2016, EPEC has reached a cumulative trade volume of $146 billion and listed over 2.6 million products. In the year of 2019, the total trade volume reached $70 billion with 70% 1% increase compared with last year of 2018. The global website of epac.com was launched in April 2017, and it now is available in English, Spanish, and Russia. And the orders on the global website of epac.com worth of over 37.1 billion US dollars since its launch, and covering almost 30,000 categories or products listed by over 1,560 suppliers from 100 more countries over countries and regions all over the world. Over the past few years, epac.com has been actively exploring the trade opportunity and maintains a dynamic and stable cooperative relationship with the BRICS countries. On August 2017, EPAC's BRICS Pavilion was launched, providing more opportunity to promote trading among BRICS countries. In September 2017, the BRICS Business Council endorsed EPAC platform as one of the 8 core achievements of BRICS cooperation in 2017. And as of August 2020, this year, there are 71 suppliers from BRICS countries, of course, except China, and 245 kinds of online listed products, and the trade volume of the BRICS countries reached 3.1 billion US dollars. Under the hit of COVID-19, the economy of our country has been seen severely affected, especially in the aspect of global trade. In such a time when the challenge and opportunity coexist, APAC has been actively making efforts to address those concerns to our platform members. In order to help the companies to face through the financial situation, this year we built the electronic debt certificate flow platform we call eDebt Vouchers on EPAC's Chinese website, which transfer the company's credit into the transferable, financeable, and flexibly allocatable electronic certificates. Through the electronization, this innovative supply chain financial services cut the cost for the entire supply chain, increase the transparency of the supply chain, and promotes the transaction of the platform. It fully utilizes digital technology and to increase the efficiency of our financial services, and we believe it will contribute to the recovery of the industrial e-commerce and also to the real company under the COVID-19 pandemic. For the e-commerce supply chain, we call EPAC launched the supply chain sunshine actions in April 18 of 2019. And this year we have been continuously promoting the actions and an initiative to help to face the current situation to especially the restrict the business visits, and with the 4 core demands of the procurement, standardization, manufacturing, digitalization, and logistic transparency and information interconnection. We are committed to promoting the online supervision of the manufacturing process and trackable logistic situation. And presents the above 2 innovative services mainly serve the EPAC domestic member needs. It only serves the Chinese members. And we believe that in the near future, more and better service will be gradually open in the global users. In the overall, in the worldwide, especially in our EPAC global website, web service. Besides, we also launched the new functions to help overseas members to expand Chinese markets. When overseas members uploaded commodity and suppliers information on our global website, and the website can offer the functions and to synchronously translate into Chinese and showed on our EPAC Chinese website. And this is we call the commodity can show directly to our around 78,000 Chinese members directly, and also overseas members can directly interact with our Chinese purchasers or sellers, our suppliers, to our overseas purchasers or buyers with the help of our translation tools supplied by our EPAC global website. That is a function, basic function. This is a new function to greatly enhance international trade opportunities, we think. Focusing on the key sectors of the industry, e-commerce, and making the full use of the information technology and network technology under the digital economy era, EPAC aims to promote the transformation and upgrading of industry e-commerce and help the economic recovery of the world, including BRICS countries, I think. Innovation creates future. Let's move forward together to witness a better tomorrow for global trade and commerce. Thank you, Dr. SPARTAK.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much, Mr. Wong Xiaodong. I would like to say that your presentation was very interesting, fruitful, showing us how to use digital solutions to support business in our difficult situation and various restrictions on the movement of people. I have only a small question to you. Could you specify efforts made by the EPAC for BRICS trade very shortly, please? You forgot to switch the microphone.
I'm sorry, it's mute. APEC launched the BRICS pavilion for BRICS countries in 2017. So it's enhanced the trade between the BRICS countries very briefly and helpful, we think. And also in the past 2 years, we have signed an MOU with the trade mission of the Russia Federation and also with the Brazilian Trade and Investment Promotion Agency, C2 MOU, and to enhance the bilateral trade opportunities between the two countries, especially to Russia and Brazil. We signed 2 MOU, I mean, in our agreements, something like that. And also we make some efforts to supply some our different countries specialists, especially buyers or sales help specialists to help the trade could made between the BRICS countries more easily, because we have office in Russia, our subsidiaries in the Middle East, in Japan, in the United States, and also in Germany, such as around the world. We have all the subsidiaries and colleagues around the world. So we have specialists to have the trade to make between, especially to make between the BRICS countries very easily. That we were made. And also our overseas high quality supply resources can be supplied to the BRICS countries to make more smoothly trade or better trade opportunity between countries. That's what we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you much. Let me introduce to you another speaker from China, Mr. Terence Xiong, Vice President for Global Development at Chinese genomic company, BGI, which has been playing an important role in the global fight against COVID-19, supplying test kits and building laboratories worldwide, including BRICS countries. Mr. Xiong will make some introduction and provide his view from the industry. Please, Mr. Xiong.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Andrey. Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I know that we are behind our time, so that I would be try to be as brief as I may. A few words about BGI. We are a global leading genomics research institute and commercial sequencing service provider headquartered in Shenzhen, China. During the COVID-19, we have developed our PCR test kits, and so far we have exported over 40 million tests to over 180 countries and regions. As Mr. Chair just mentioned, we are also building COVID-19 detection laboratories worldwide. We have so far built more than 80 laboratories in 28 countries and regions. If we add all these laboratories together, we can process about 300,000 samples per day. And here is a small example. We donated and we built the laboratories in Serbia back in April. The Serbian President, Mr. Vučić, met with the BGI team. And on the right, this is me introducing to the Serbian Prime Minister, Madam Brnabić, about the laboratory. Let's see how the laboratory helped fighting the pandemic. Well, the laboratory was opened on the 22nd of April. We started collecting samples on that very day. And in about 1 week's time, we have reached our maximum capacity. We processed more than 2,000 samples per day. And that counts for about 1/3 of Serbia's testing capability as a country, so that we are making contributions to the country's fight. We will keep this video. Speaking about BRIC countries, we have supplied testing kits, altogether over 2 million test kits to BRIC states. And in Brazil alone, we have supplied more than 1 million. And about laboratories commissioned by Fiocruz, which is the famous public health institute in Brazil, we have built 2 laboratories in Rio de Janeiro and also Fortaleza. And adding together, we can process 25,000 tests per day. We are not only building the lab, but also we did technology transfer and personnel training. On the downside of the screen, you can see our personnel, our technical staff are giving training to the local team. The international leaders have been putting more importance on strengthening health infrastructure, and as a member of the health industry, we certainly feel very much encouraged. The message from China, President Xi Jinping has called for building a global community of health. From the UN, the Secretary General has urged all parties to speed up and scale up investment in universal health coverage. From BGI's point of view, we have 3 recommendations. The first is about health infrastructure. During the past week, China's Qingdao city has discovered 12 newly infected cases, but the local government has ordered tests for all of its 9 million population, which is amazing. That told us the testing labs should be part of the infrastructure, and also on emergency time, on the outbreak of the pandemic, there should be the capability for emergency response. As we can see in the picture, we have temporary labs located in cars. Secondly, it is important for the health industry to play its part. The Director General of the WHO has said the health industry has never been more important. The industry will play an essential role in creating a healthier, safer, and fairer world we all want. It is definitely true. In BGI's history, we have established partnerships with many local governments of China to start prenatal health screening, which is very effective. And also we have, together with the Chinese government, built the China National Gene Bank, which is owned by the government, but operated by BGI. Third, but not the least, we should strengthen international cooperation. BGI has a motto, Omics for All, meaning that we would like to share our expertise, our technology with partners around the world for COVID-19, for prenatal health, for cancer, for infectious diseases, you name it. If there's anything we may do, please let us know. Well, ladies and gentlemen, to sum up, well, it is in about 1 month's time, we would have the next BRICS summit. During this year's Russian presidency, the major goal would be improve the living standards and life quality of our people. So it makes perfect sense as in some way, this forum is a preparation for the summit. I think we should make recommendations to the summit that the summit should send out a clear message. It is important to make more and more investment in health infrastructure. It is important to strengthen cooperation between governments, individuals, and the industry to establish more public-private partnership. And it is important to scale up international cooperation. Well, thank you very much, everyone. Thanks.
Thank you much for your presentation, a very humanistic one. And it is a very, I should say, timely example of BRICS innovative potential and good cooperation results and prospects in combating COVID-19. Thank you. Now let me introduce, well, I'm delighted to give the floor to speakers from South Africa, namely Mr. COOVADIA, Chief Executive at Business Unity South Africa, who would focus on the joint efforts between business, labor, government, and community groups to manage the impact of COVID-19 in South Africa. Also, we appreciate comments on how business sector organized itself in response to COVID-19 and assisted government anti-pandemic efforts. Mr. COOVADIA, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. And I'm just going to put up one page on the screen. I appreciate, can you see that? Can you see that?
No, not yet. Not yet, but already.
Let me just see if I can do that. Can you see that now?
Yes, yes.
Okay. I appreciate that you have time constraints, so I'm going to go through this as quickly as possible. I'll just touch a little bit on the impact, and South Africa was in recession pre-COVID, and we received a ratings downgrade to sub-investment grade early in COVID. So the economy wasn't doing very well, but during COVID, we had a number of lockdowns. We had one of the most severe lockdowns in the world early in COVID, and that was lockdown level 5, during which time all businesses, all activity was essentially closed. We've now progressed from there to lockdown level 1, where major parts of the economy are open and activity is taking place, but still within the context of limitations in numbers for funerals and large gatherings and so on, and also promoting very, very heavily and communicating consistently on wearing of masks and social distancing and other health protocols. We've been fairly successful, we believe, in containing the virus. We currently have just over 705,000 cases. We've had just over 1,400 cases in the last day. That's down from 2,000 to 3,000 cases that we had in the early part of COVID. We've had just over 18,000 deaths, and we've conducted just over 4.5 million tests. Just some economic data. GDP has contracted substantially as a result of COVID. In the last quarter, compared to the previous quarter, we were down 16%, resulting in an annualized growth rate of minus 51%. We're expecting, according to the OECD, GDP growth of just 0.6% in 2021. There's been significant business impact, particularly on small, medium enterprises, that many of whom have closed. We've lost 2.2 million jobs, according to the South African statistics published just about 2 weeks ago. The budget deficit is forecasted to be 13.3% in the current year, and the debt to GDP is expected to be above 100% in 2023. So we have taken an economic knock. COVID, like in other parts of the world, has had a severe impact. But I think it's important to just talk about how we've responded, and that the pandemic and the crisis has to an extent brought the country together. And I'd like to spend the rest of my time talking about that. So the initial response from government was a rescue package of 500 billion rand, which is $28 million, which in South African terms is significant. And that rescue package included a 500 million rand or $9 million credit guarantee fund that the National Treasury and the South African Reserve Bank backed up, so that banks could actually lend money to businesses under stress and individuals under stress. Business Unity South Africa, the organization of which I'm CEO, established a broad business platform called Business for South Africa. It's a platform, it's not a new organization, and through Business for South Africa, we enabled all of business, not just our members, to actually make interventions during COVID. And through Business for South Africa, which we established and at its peak has had about 400 people, professionals, experts, researchers, economists, working and helping us in do what Business for South Africa has done, all on a pro bono basis. Not a single person there out of the 400 odd earned any money during that period. We did a lot of work with government in the initial stages. We acted as a central repository to compete for and secure PPE globally. We helped with tracking and tracing. Businesses helped with facilities, health facilities where hospitals were under strain. Business, together with Solidarity Fund, together with the government, established what we call a Solidarity Fund of about $170 million, which is about 3 billion rand. And the fund had, in the initial stages, funded a lot of the PPE and is now doing funding to actually alleviate some of the social problems that the country is still experiencing. We have an organization called NEDLAC, which is the National Economic Development and Labor Council, which is a regulated body where business, labor, government, and community groups actually interact with each other on policies that have a social and economic impact. And under NEDLAC, we established a rapid response task team that has been meeting for 3 hours every Tuesday morning since the pandemic started. We've interacted with our social, labor, government, and community social partners very well. Business, together with those social partners, have worked very well in responding to COVID. We brought business capacity and expertise to bear to help distribute grants which government put into place. So there's unemployment insurance benefits, there's grants for people who did not have jobs even pre-COVID. We extended the banking industry, did not charge any fees in distribution of grants during the COVID period. And we used the banking and insurance infrastructure to an extent to distribute those grants efficiently. We work with our social partners to manage public transport, to communicate, to ensure that masks were used and sanitation happened. We did a lot of work on behavioral change to encourage people to wear masks, to encourage people to do social distancing. Lots of communication. Business for South Africa has and still has a daily newsletter communicating to our members and them communicating to their staff. And then we managed business issues during the various lockdowns. So if businesses contacted us to say they are having certain problems with the regulations, we interacted between business and government to actually have a dynamic approach toward regulations and changing regulations, even during lockdowns, to enable businesses to actually function. We then also, through this period, have managed to develop just over 30 local companies, which we didn't have before, to actually produce, to manufacture PPE. In the initial stages, we had to import it because we needed it urgently. But through the process of interaction and engagement with our social partners, we managed to develop just over 30 companies, most of them small companies, and we are continuing to support them, and we will institutionalize these companies into one of Business Unity South Africa structures so that these companies continue to receive support. And we, off the back of that, we using the best practice of that to actually broaden local manufacturing, localization in South Africa as we go forward. The other thing that Business for South Africa did is we developed an economic recovery strategy for post-COVID. And in developing that, we looked at what the current situation is. We looked at what are the critical enablers for growth and for investment. We did deep dives into about 52 sectors, and we arrived at 10 critical sectors that we believe we needed to work on as a country. And these are the sectors that we felt could ramp up post-COVID with less difficulty than other sectors. We looked at the fiscal situation and how we begin to deal with that. And we looked at how we not just rebuild our economy, but repurpose our economy so that it is attractive to investors. We improve our ratings and indices on the world competitive ratings, and we improve our standing on the ease of doing business index. And we believe from a business point of view that those two improvements on those two indices would be the measure for success for economic growth in our country. We have our economic recovery strategy has served as one input into a government economic recovery and reconstruction plan that our president actually announced last week. And We've been engaging with government since the 2nd of July when we presented our plan, but those engagements then came into NEDLAC, and we have, for the last month or two, been engaging with our social partners to do a number of things. One, we developed a document that identified 10 or 12 immediately implementable areas that government could actually do. So it's to issue an RFP for a tranche of renewable energy. We've had 4 tranches of renewable energy to issue an RFP for the next tranche, to get spectrum release, to make interventions in the Durban port to make that more efficient, to sort out mining exploration licenses so that we can invest in mining exploration. And our view is that if government implements those, there'd be immediate release of private sector investment, local and global, and we can then begin to kickstart our economy. And we are currently talking to government and our social partners about that. We're engaging at a high level on how we get implementation going. As late as last night, we put together a high-level 3-a-side, and myself, my chair and my deputy chair represented business there together with 3 ministers and leaders from labor and community. And we're looking at a structure to begin implementation on an economic recovery trajectory, because we believe that we don't have time for this. We will have to go out into the market to raise money. We will be at a disadvantage because of our rating. But we believe that if we continue to work together as a country, as we have during the COVID pandemic, and we move with urgency, recognizing the crisis we are in as are other countries post-COVID, that we can put ourselves onto the first rung of the ladder that will take us towards sustained economic growth over a period of time, so that we can begin to actually improve the living conditions of our people. And implementation is the most critical thing at the moment, and that's what we're working on. We are trying to impress upon our social partners that we must utilize expertise and capacity that sits in business. We have offered that so that we can begin to unlock some of the low-hanging fruit that we have, and also begin to actually discuss and engage on some of the structural reform issues in the economy and how we address our fiscal problem, because that is a major issue. So let me stop there. That's the impact and how we've responded to COVID as a country, and how it sort of created a social and economic compact in the country as we've been responding to COVID. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. COOVADIA, for your presentation and for your believing that only the cooperation, close cooperation and joint efforts between business, civil society groups, local groups, and the government will provide for faster overcoming of the negative effects of COVID-19. Thank you. Well, our concluding speaker is Mr. Lerata Matabog, Deputy Director General from Department of Trade, Industry and Competition, South Africa. We would appreciate your comments on the situation and economic prospects from the governmental view, please.
Thank you very much.
I'm sorry, Miss, yeah, I'm sorry.
Ms. Lerata Matabog, I'm quite pleased to have an opportunity to share some views with you. Good morning to the colleagues in the time zones where it's morning, good afternoon, and good evening. Chair, I believe that my colleague, Mr. COOVADIA, has given quite an intensive and broad strokes of South African response broadly as the compact between government and business. So mine today is to also offer a reflection on the response by the African Union in responding to the COVID crisis, and bearing in mind that in 2020, South Africa is the chair of the African Union. So there's quite a number of initiatives that we had to take as a country and as a continent. And it's useful that we share this because also issues of intra-BRICS and also issues of BRICS Africa collaboration, which became quite an important theme in past business fora, comes to the fore in that regard. So if you'll indulge me, I'll just give you an update of the decisions of the African Union Heads of States and Bureau of Assembly under the leadership of South Africa. Undertook a number of initiatives, and these are espoused in what we call a continental strategy document to respond to COVID-19 virus. And this was endorsed in March 2020. The African Union has actually established a COVID-19 response fund to assist with boosting the capacity of the African Center for Disease Control and Prevention, what we call the Africa CDC, as well as to assist African countries to combat and contain the spread of the COVID-19 virus. Similarly, we mobilize international support for Africa's efforts. So the chairperson in South Africa's President, Excellency Cyril Ramaphosa, had quite a number of engagements with the G20 countries, World Bank, IMF, you name it, in order to mobilize international support for Africa's efforts around the pandemic. And we anticipate that also during the BRICS summit, it will be one of the key areas that our president in his capacity as chair will be engaging the BRICS partnership on. The African Union chairperson appointed special envoys who are tasked with the responsibility of soliciting financial support for the continental effort from a gamut of institutions that I've just mentioned, G20, international organizations, including the UN and its agencies, the donor community, and the international business community, so that we can then support a comprehensive stimulus package for Africa, which is centered around specifically in infrastructure, development, industrialization, and the like. The chairperson also appointed Mr. Strive Masiyiwa as the African Union Special Envoy for the procurement of personal protective equipment, PPEs, and other medical supplies. The envoy was actually able to facilitate in a very short space of time the sourcing of emergency medical supplies from various countries such as Canada, China, India, Netherlands, and South Korea when it was needed the most. Because at the time that the world became relatively serious about COVID around March, most countries on the continent did not have the necessary supply. So we had to work in concert as a continent at AU level. And this envoy was quite instrumental in that. And international partners came to the fore at the time when there was emergency needs so that we can begin to address the implications of the virus. So also in supporting Africa's own industrial development, the African Union Heads of States in the form of the Bureau launched an Africa Medical Supplies Platform, which is going to act as a nodal point and is already doing that as a nodal point for pooling resources and distributing medical supplies throughout the African continent. And the long-term, medium to long-term objective is that the majority of these medical supplies will be manufactured and innovated in Africa. It is also anticipated that this medical supplies platform will provide a means for accelerating COVID-19 testing, tracing, and tracking requirements in Africa. So again, I mentioned this because these are also opportunities for international partnerships, particularly partnerships with the BRICS insofar as strengthening this industrialization efforts and the production of these medical supplies and requirements that we're talking about for Africa. All these measures that I've spoken to have contributed to ameliorating the medical burden of COVID-19 on Africa. I'm sure a lot of our international participants have read the news, and there's somewhat of a surprise of how Africa managed to escape high mortality rates with respect to COVID. We believe that part of it has been the decisive nature of African leaders who came together very quickly and took deep, decisive action, including early lockdowns and the like. My colleague Cass spoke to that. So our leaders took tough decisions very early at both country and continental levels. Now, following the emergency measures that we took, We believe that now the next phase that we need to be serious about is about formulating decisive post-COVID-19 economic recovery plans for Africa at both national and continental levels. And here we believe that the BRIC member states have a strategic role to play in partnering with Africa's efforts and making sure that we all realize global prosperity, really. And in doing so, I'd like for us to recall the strategic priorities that we set for ourselves in 2018 in South Africa, as well as in 2019 in Brazil. In South Africa and in Brazil, we agreed to achieve 3 objectives towards BRICS growth and prosperity. We said that we're going to focus on increasing the value-added trade amongst BRICS countries as a priority. We said that we want to increase the value of intra-BRICS investments. And there was also concerted effort and conversations around strengthening the BRICS Africa partnership. We believe as South Africa, from a government standpoint and a business as well, we believe that if we pursue these 3 objectives, we'll be on the right course for post-COVID recovery. We need to work together in tandem, not just ourselves as Africans, but of course with our BRICS partners, to look at how we can strengthen our value-added trade statistics. Because already now the trade is skewed towards a lot of commodity exports, particularly from South Africa to the rest of the BRICS economy. So our concern is that how do we then have more value-added exports from South Africa to the rest of the BRICS and vice versa, of course. Similarly, we've noted over the years the South African investments in the BRICS member states individually has been increasing considerably. I can just give you a figure. Since 2005, South Africa has been a net investor into the BRIC with a record $82 billion in foreign investments held in various BRICS countries. So as at 2017, we had $82 billion in the BRICS. But then the BRICS countries collectively have only invested over $11 billion in the South African economy. So from our side, we encourage initiatives that will strengthen intra-BRICS investments, especially the investments by BRICS member states into South Africa as part of our collective BRICS economic recovery efforts. We also, of course, extend an invitation later this year to all the private sector and government BRICS participants to South Africa's Presidential Investment Conference, so that you can get more detail on some of the strategic opportunities that we have for you in the South African economy. Last but not least, it's very important that we work on a program for strengthening the BRIC Africa partnership. We believe that the African continent is on its path to realizing its full potential, and we welcome any BRIC investments in any African country, really, so that we can take advantage of the opportunities that are going to be presented by the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and the 2.5 trillion household consumption opportunity that any company, whether from Brazil, from Russia, from India, from China, is going to enjoy as you know, by virtue of investing in Africa. Also, we believe that investing in Africa's infrastructure and manufacturing opportunities in Africa really makes good business sense for any BRIC entity and or private sector. So if we're going to talk about post-COVID recovery and growth, we need to look at growth opportunities, particularly on the African continent, insofar as investments are concerned. So we look forward to the strengthening of the BRIC Africa partnership going forward as a strategic agenda item and point of discussion. And I thank you, Chair.
Thank you much, Ms. Lerata Matabok, for your speech. Very important is that post-pandemic recovery, as you said, is very much dependent on fostering investments in health infrastructure, in other productive sectors, and especially intra-BRICS private investments, which are now not very dynamic. I think that post-pandemic situation is exactly the case to pay special attention to promoting intra-BRICS investments. Well, we have run out of speakers. I would like very shortly make some concluding remarks. That was a very productive exchange of views, very, I should say, thought-provoking. We raised many important questions for BRICS economic recovery, for BRICS future, for our country's future, for the world future. The first point, I think that we had excellent exchange of views on the national anti-pandemic policies and measures, and we are now much more aware of the existing best practices in this area, which is important. And also is important that through this discussion, we are now better fit for fighting COVID-19 together. Well, the second point, as I understand, we all look with cautious optimism in the future and see potential for recovery, of course, with the help of timely support measures. That is also important. The third point is that we mentioned the importance of wide cooperation between civil society, business, and governments, and closer than ever. It is important to underline this, to provide comprehensive, deep assistance to people and the economy. The fourth point is that all the participants stressed the important role of BRICS in helping member economies to overcome negative pandemic effects through various channels. And the fifth point is that participants see as very important investment in digital platforms to support international business and business in general, plus investments in health infrastructure, including pandemic monitoring facilities. These, I think, should become the important points of BRICS' future agenda. So thank you very much for your participation, for your very interesting presentations, for your comments on the current situation, for your vision of future economic prospects. I think there was a very fruitful discussion which paved the way for future sessions of Business Forum. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Good day and night and morning for everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Andrey. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.